Hello and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton, and welcome back to the Toffee Blues podcast. I'm joined once again by Harry. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt today, Al, because like most of our players in that Chelsea game, I too wish I was on a beach. And I've been working on that joke since the Chelsea game. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely spending your days well, but yeah, yeah, like I say, I mean, I guess that's a better place to start than any really. I think we were discussing the Chelsea game last week, and I think it was a little. We had a bit more of a flat feeling about it all, I think, didn't we?
yeah.
I think with Tarkowski being absent and it pretty much being confirmed now that he's going to be out for the season. I think hopes were particularly high going into this one, I'd say, and then obviously there were a few changes in the lineup going into it, and yeah, it was a bit of a flat game, I thought. I think yeah, I think there was probably a general consensus that maybe. If we'd been a bit braver, we probably could have got something out of the game. We maybe didn't take it to
Yeah.
Chelsea as much as we should have done, and maybe gave them a bit too much respect. Um, but yeah, I don't know what were your general thoughts really, just on the game as a whole.
I think it's the second game in a row, and therefore the second pod in a row, where we're talking about Everton losing to a side that on paper we shouldn't be ashamed to be losing to in terms of position in the league, in terms of resource available to the sides respectively. But it's the second week in a row that we're talking about in actuality losing to sides that aren't that good, that certainly aren't living up to the hype that they have. I do think in general, like you're absolutely spot on. It was a flat game. I worried with this one that the moment we got confirmed as mathematically safe, David Moyes was very keen in his press conference to stress the season isn't over. We're going to be fighting for like every point in every game. I just think it's a step too far for him with this group of players. There are so many players out of contract. We are mathematically safe. It was going to take a gargantuan effort and probably lies about Barcelona scouts being in the stadium to motivate that group of players to the point of actually trying to fight to get anything out of that game. And I know that we'll get into the details of certain performances. It isn't all doom and gloom, but I just think overall it was probably and sadly an expected result and an expected performance in terms of the levels that we saw for some of those players.
Yeah, and I guess is it almost a case of like there's so many players in that squad that have at this point of the season would have really had to put their bodies on the line and really had to dig in for 38 games a season, and
Yeah.
and obviously for fans as well that takes its toll on us as supporters as well, of course, and we're almost in this very weird position where we sort of had it a bit last season, but it wasn't quite the same with the points deductions and all sorts, and it all kind of our safety came very quickly then after like it was basically 3 games in a week, wasn't it? And suddenly
Yeah.
we were looking really bad before that, and then suddenly we're safe. It was a bit of an odd one, but for this one, this has kind of been coming for a while, and as you say, now it's mathematically safe. There is literally nothing to play for now. We're literally just playing for pride. And as you say, there's players that probably aren't expecting to be here next season, and that have had all these really difficult seasons the last few years. It's almost like you know they just feel like this is almost what we've earned, really. Games where, and some teams can kind of relish that a bit. They play with that freedom. It actually, like spurs them on to play even better and express themselves a little bit more. But as you say, we really kind of went in on ourselves, especially for the first half an hour. I thought we just let Chelsea get all over us really, and we were too slow in turning the ball over a lot and just getting caught out. And we just let Chelsea swarm us really. And obviously they get the goal. Um, and then yeah, it kind of seems to be a case a lot where we come out for the second half with a bit more intent about us and I think we caused Chelsea some issues there. We just couldn't quite put the ball in the back of the net. It took some good saves from Sanchez. So it feels like it's maybe instructions a little bit as well. I think Moyes maybe telling him, don't there's no issue, there's no there's no reason to like put your body on the line and potentially risk getting a long term injury that could affect next season or anything like that. And obviously some of these players don't want to be injured in the summer, of course, if they're going to be looking for a move. So there's all sorts of
Yeah.
things like that about just not needing to really go full throttle. But it's almost a case where you don't even need to do that. We just need to play with a bit more intent, and I think we showed that Chelsea struggled with us a little bit at times when we did that. We just couldn't quite have that clinical edge.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know the thing for me is I've gone back and forth on whether I should make this point on the pod or not, and I'm kind of arguing with myself at this stage of the season. So I'll put my point out there, and then I'll instantly shoot myself down now, so you don't have to do it. My initial feeling after that game was if the previous manager had have been in charge of those two games and those two performances, would we be so calm about it? And is the sort of the Moyes effect, and has Moyes' initial run since returning bought him a couple of performances like that? My counter to my own argument is I've got to stop worrying about it. That the objective by about game 5 this season was very clearly going to be safety, was very clearly going to be going into the new stadium as a Premier League side. We will come on to the remaining fixtures. Those last two games at Goodison, if a performance like that turns up, I don't think we'll be as balanced about it. Emotions will certainly play a part, but for me, what I would say is that that's the sort of the takeaway that I've had from that game. And we've known that the majority of this squad under 4 or 5 managers over the last 4 or 5 years have picked and choosed when they've wanted to step up and when they've wanted to phone it in. So the players don't surprise me, regardless of the reason, regardless that they might not be there next season. And that might also be a contractual point that we can talk about today or on another pod. My criticism off the pitch of David Moyes has been that I don't think these contracts have been handled very well. I don't think that this whole thing about the change of ownership, I think, has gone on too long now. I think they're in place. They must have an idea by now, like what they want to do. And I think we've dragged it too long. And I think that's starting to bleed onto the pitch. But yeah, I think the key takeaway there for me was not really much about the game because it was a pretty pointless game and it felt that way before, during, now, afterwards. But I think what it's starting to bring to light is some pretty amber flags going into next season when it's such a crucial postseason, when it's such a crucial preseason, when it's such a crucial season next season. I'm starting to get mixed feelings about a lot of things now.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think to go back on the initial point you made, and it's not exactly to shoot you down because I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying at all, but it is all just a case of tempering expectations. And I remember saying when Moyes came in that I didn't really think too much was going to change because
Yeah.
it's the same group of players. You've got to remember it's only Alcaraz added to that, and I think Alcaraz has been quite a bright spot for me. But obviously there's a little bit of you know Moyes doesn't seem entirely sure on him yet, and we don't know, as we've discussed on countless podcasts the last few weeks, whether that's to do with the terms of his loan deal or actually like him as a player. But apart from that, it's the exact same group of players that Deitch had to work with. And Moyes and Deitch aren't anywhere near as far apart in footballing philosophies as people might like to make out. And I think it was. I think you look back on it now, and it does just almost seem like almost a classic case of a managerial bounce that we had those first few weeks under Moyes, I think. And obviously it was a little bit of a change of setup, but only minor tweaks with obviously O'Brien coming in at right
Yeah.
back. But it was just mostly a bit more braver and a bit more drilling belief into these players that they can play with a bit more style really than we had under Deitch, I'd say. But and now you look at these last few games and they do look very Deitch games really, just the odd goal in it, and teams just kind of like with superior players just catching us out, but us always kind of hanging in there a little bit. It's very rare we get thumped. Um,
Yeah, true. That's
but
true.
yeah, but you look back at the game last season, the exact same fixture, and Chelsea walked all over us. And obviously, it was a very different Chelsea team. I think you can go into the arguments about how good Poch had them playing last season compared to what Maresca's done this year. But obviously, that's a very very separate point entirely. But Yeah, it is one of them, isn't it? Where I think it would have been foolish to expect everything to change dramatically under Moyes this season. I think it'll be next season where, as you say, if these performances like Saturday become the norm, that people will start to think, hang on a minute, is this was this maybe a flash in the pan those first few games? But once he's got
True.
better players to work with, then hopefully we'll those first few games will become more what we can expect going forward. And it's also a case as well that I'd say maybe on the contract front, it might just be a case of we're not entirely sure what our recruitment team's going to look like next season.
Yeah.
So it's almost a case of we don't want to commit to having players here next season that that someone might come in and really not like the look of and hopefully would have moved on. And obviously that's been a major talking point as well, hasn't it? That this squad isn't going to change rapidly, like dramatically over the summer because we just don't have the funds to bring in to replace 15 players,
No.
whatever it might be. Whether in an ideal world we'd probably like to do if we want to get onto the next level. You need that, you need to ease into that transition anyway, even if you did have all the money to spend. So yeah, it's gonna be it's not gonna happen very quickly. I don't think it's probably gonna be a bit of a project under Moyes, but I'd like to think that the majority of fan base is still more than willing to give him a go, and hopefully these last few games, as I say, are just these players. A lot of them just kind of dwindling out a little bit, and we'll either have a new like initiative going into next season, or just won't be here. So yeah, it's hopefully
Yeah.
a case like
But
that.
do you not feel I remember really vividly the game after Lampard, the Palace game where we were confirmed safe at Palace and we went into the Arsenal game. And okay, we're talking about Arsenal here when they were pushing for the league title. But I remember in that game thinking there's no pressure here. Like you could actually play a little bit of a different philosophy. You could really take the chains off these players. You could really see what they could do. And obviously it was one game. It was Arsenal. We got absolutely battered, and maybe that should have been a sign of things that were going to come under Lampard. But I really maybe came at this run in a little bit of a different way. I thought, although it was going to be hard to motivate some, I just don't understand why it would be on the flip side of this. Like why you've got a run now of 5 games. It was at the time where we were mathematically safe. I mean, hell, we've had a run of 10 games where it's felt pretty certain that we were going to be mathematically safe. And I would just love to see, particularly in these home games, particularly against Ipswich and Southampton, I just want to see like unfiltered Everton attacking football, like just park some of these sort of like tactics that have been there under Deitch and they're now under Moyes and just really like let the creativity shine, let Urine Dyes and let Dwight McNeil's and whoever you want to kind of bring into the fold. And I know we're going to talk about kind of Ipswich lineup shortly, but particularly in those two home games, I just need to see something that's a little bit inspiring for next season, regardless of who's there and who's not there. Because to your point, I think we've got to massively taper our expectations for the transfer window. I'm not here to be a Debbie Downer, but like we're not going to have a completely brand new look 11 going into next season. We're going to try and hold on to Branthwaite, try and hold on to Pickford. We know out of that core from the Chelsea game who's probably still going to be there. And there's probably going to be a handful that we wish weren't, but will be because needs must. So I just would like to see something that gives me a little bit of hope for what could happen if we were playing for top half rather than avoiding bottom three.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think if Moyes was here and was listening to these points, I think, and it's something that he's touched upon quite a bit in his press conferences recently, and that we are, if you look at it on paper, we are still hanging on in these games against the
Yeah,
teams that are in
yeah,
the top echelons of the table. And as we've said, the Chelsea performance wasn't very good, and yet with a bit more luck, we come away with at least a point there. It took some very
true.
good saves from Sanchez to keep Chelsea ahead. And City, we spoke about last week. Obviously, Tarkowski hits the post in the first half and then goes off injured, and that really changes the momentum of the game. And finally, City's quality tells, and they pick us off at the end. Um, and we spoke about Liverpool and Arsenal at the start of the month as well. We got a good point against Arsenal when we're not really at our best at all, but just managed to keep them at bay. And then Liverpool as well, we had the chances to get something there. So. The goals have dried up again a little bit recently, which is cause for concern. But you can still pick out chances in all these games where it was what Deitch spoke about a lot as well. And I hate to don't want to be all the XG stuff or whatever, but it's a case of the chances are there. It's not like we're doing nothing and just letting these teams come away with a 1-0 and shaking their hand and saying see you later. There is a little bit in there. As you say, it's more, I think, a mentality thing that
Mm,
why can't we be doing that for 90 minutes? Because then surely you increase your chances of getting the win. And we saw it at Nottingham Forest, and everyone responded
yeah,
amazingly to it. That was as we said, that was a proper 90-minute performance from Everton where we were just on top pretty much the entire game, and Forest just couldn't get near us. And we finally got our just rewards at the end. We could have won that game by several more goals than that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I get your point. But it's not quite as if you look at it on paper, and a neutral will probably look at it and say, yeah, they've obviously the wins have dried up a little bit lately, and the goals have dried up, but it's not a terrible run of form. And we spoke about April at the start and saying it was going to be a really difficult month. And when you look at it now, and it's 4 points, which isn't amazing, but I think that's probably about as good as we could have expected, really, at the start of the month, I'd say. And there's been no game where we've been hammered and really deserved to lose. I think City's probably the closest example to that. And as I say, the Tarkowski injury really played a big part in that and just kind of knocked us
yeah,
for
for sure.
confidence a little bit. So yeah, it's all context, isn't it? It's interesting how you can look at
Yeah,
these things differently.
we've said this about the entire Moyes run, though, Al, right? Like we've said, one win, we go and win convincingly against Ipswich this weekend, and everyone will say, yeah, no, it's been a good end to the season. We even if we draw or lose to Ipswich, it'll be kind of like grumbles and rumbles, but we'll park it and say, well, look, we're safe, and it's not his squad, it's not his vision, it's just really been like needs must. So I on April in general, I think possibly April is a microcosm of the Moyes run in general. I think it started so well. Like the point at Arsenal, the 3 points against Forest, obviously off the back of a quite competitive derby defeat to Liverpool. I think we had such a positive start that it's then disappointing that we sat here in mid-April and said 4 points, decent, and now we're sitting here at the end of April going 4 points, it's all right, Like could have maybe had a few more, but you're absolutely right. Context is key, and we've not been outplayed, we've not been outperformed. And again, I'll go back to my earlier point, particularly with your Chelseas and your Manchester Cities, the resources that they have, the options that they have versus what he has at his disposal currently. It is very, very clear that it's a positive that we're competing in those games for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we've spoken a little bit about the transfer window. Obviously, I'm sure as the podcast get on towards the end of the season, this will become more of a talking point. But maybe it's time to start bringing these in as a bit more of a talking point in this one. And obviously, I'd say the two main bits of the kind of news outlets that have come out this week have been about Calvert-Lewin's future, which has obviously rumbled on pretty much throughout this season and beyond. It seems like it's gone on forever without any real updates of any sort of substance, really. And obviously, I'm sure every Evertonian has some sort of strong opinion on it. But what would you do? Because I could still see pretty much anything happening with it. That's the mad thing.
Yeah.
After all this time, it's not real any sort of clarity on what's going to happen, really.
He's I mean, he's going to be a really good signing for like a Newcastle. If you that seems to be, I personally feel like he's going to go to Newcastle on a free, or he's going to sign a new deal and stay at Everton. If he goes to Newcastle, he's going to be rotated with Isak. I think actually for him, with his fitness record, his injury record over the last few years, I don't necessarily think that's a role that he would turn his nose up at. The chance to kind of come in when Isak needs to be rested. They're obviously looking like they're going to have some form of European competition next season, so they will have more games. So that need for rotation is there. But I don't know, reading recent reports, reading the news recently, I have a strange feeling that he's going to be the one that stays, that we weren't expecting. I think Moyes will be the one that kind of convinces him into maybe probably a 2 year extension, I would guess. I don't think the club would agree to a 1 year. I think it would be a 2 year minimum. And I think it's right because I don't see where what world we fight in where Liam Delap is an option for us. I know that, when it lists the clubs that are interested in these players, sadly, I'll get hate in the comments. If he's offered the chance to go to a Chelsea, back to Manchester City, to Man United, okay, the argument there with United or Everton is probably like effectively two sleepy fallen giants at this point. But I just don't see a world where he picks us over some of the other clubs he's linked to. And we know trying to get a number nine is difficult. And we know that on his day, he's a good number nine, Calvert-Lewin. Newcastle wouldn't want him. Other clubs wouldn't want him, even on a free, if he wasn't. So I think he'll get this one figured out. And I think he'll have another couple of years. And I think we've all got to start being a little bit kinder to Calvert-Lewin because I think he has given body and soul to Everton over the last few years, and he deserves a lot more respect on his name than he gets a lot of the time for me. So yeah, I think he'll stay. I'd be surprised now to see him leave because I don't think there's been enough evidence this season for clubs to take a calculated risk on him. I think clubs would be taking a risk based on his form under Carlo Ancelotti. I don't think we've seen enough of him under Dyche, under Moyes to warrant a move at this point. So I'm quietly confident he's going to stay.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I kind of have that feeling as well the last few weeks. It seems to be kind of almost going towards that conclusion. And yeah, I agree as well. A lot of the fan base seems to just be completely fed up with him and done with it all, and seem to think he's not committed to the club. When if he signs the contracts, he obviously is. Because as you say, there's options where he could go, where he'd almost certainly get more money than he's on here. Um, and so if he commits to the club, then he clearly sees a future for himself here. And Moyes hasn't really had too much of a look at him yet. Obviously, he went down in that Brighton game, didn't he? Which was only his third game in charge. But against Tottenham, when we won 3-2, I thought he was excellent. Scored a really good goal, and had a
Yeah.
really good all-round performance where he looked a lot more like the Calvert-Lewin we used to see back under like Marco Silva and Ancelotti, as you mentioned. Um, so it could very well be that he actually suits this Moyes team very well, and that
Yeah.
he's Moyes has already shown that we can kind of adapt to different sort of styles of strikers. We don't do what we do under Dyche, where they play the same role no matter what. We play to their strengths, and playing to Calvert-Lewin's strengths would obviously appeal to him a lot. So yeah, I'm kind of the same as you really. If he's committed and wants to stay and doesn't want a stupid pay increase. Obviously, no one's entirely sure what exactly he's on. There's all sorts of numbers that get tossed around, but obviously
Yeah.
the club won't pay him anything stupid if they don't think it's right for him to stay. So yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as you really. And then from one injury prone striker to another, obviously Richarlison is once again another thing that just seems to come around every few weeks. Apparently he's our top target this summer. Don't think there's any real truth in it if I'm being
No, no.
totally honest. Um, but it's very much one of them where you've got to let sentimentality, you've got to put it to one side really, because it's one of them where on paper I just know it we probably shouldn't do it, but if the links became more and more concrete, I just know I'd be all over it because I just wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to help myself. I was exactly the same when Moyes came in. I think if you'd asked me in November and December, oh, should we get Moyes back? No, that ship's probably sailed. And then as soon as the links became more, oh, hello, and feeling
Bring
like
him
a kid,
home. Yeah.
feeling like a kid again, But and Richarlison, I'd be exactly the same because obviously a real fan's favourite even now. Um, and obviously, the fact he's injury prone has an awful lot to do with just how much he gave in those last few weeks as an Everton player. Of course, it
Yeah.
almost seems to have derailed his career very very sadly for him. But if we see that potentially there's a road for recovery for him there, then why would we not want him back? Because there's clearly still a player in there, still only 27, I'd say. So it's mental. This is still getting talked about, but.
But do you not feel like we end up with the same links, we end up with the same names getting mentioned, and realistically Richarlison coming back to Everton has been on the wall since the moment that he left. And what I would say is at the moment in this stage where they are links, I would say Yeah, let's just. I think the general advice here from this podcast to any Evertonians listening is there's no international tournament this summer. It's going to be a very long transfer window, rumor mill. You're going to have to pick and choose how invested you get in it because it could absolutely destroy you. I think as an Evertonian, it will, especially with the new ownership, the new stadium. So until things become more concrete, I don't want to get too hooked on it. I actually think taking sentiment out of it, he isn't the worst option that Everton could go after, regardless of whether he had played for us before. I think he can play on the wing. He's done that for Everton in the previous spell that he had at the club. He can play up front, which he has done at times. It's supposedly his preferred position. And we're talking about squad depth. So if the price is right, why would we not have him as an option up front and or an option on the wing? Whether he comes back and he's a starter is a different discussion. How he fits into a Moyes system is a different discussion. But I think a squad player at the right price when pretty much looks likely he's not going to be a Spurs player next season, then why would we not entertain it? And sometimes better the devil you know. And I think with this squad rebuild that we're trying to, well, that's going to have to happen, I think at times we're going to have to look at known entities rather than unknown entities. I think this sort of gamble is not where Everton are at right now. I don't think we can do this Brighton pluck a wonder kid from Argentina for £5.50 and sell him for 62 million a season later. I think we're really going to have to take some educated risks on players we know from the Premier League personally. So why not is
Yeah,
my answer.
yeah, yeah. I agree with all of that. I'd be, it's mental, isn't it? Like he'd be. I think it would be such a inspiring thing to happen at Bramley-Moore. To be fair, I think
Yeah.
fans would respond so well to it, and you just know he'd give his all whenever he was on the pitch for Everton. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. You know, we've had an injury-prone striker this season. You know, I doubt Tottenham
Yeah.
would loan him to us. I think they'd want to get some sort of fee for him, and obviously the wages are probably another discussion as well. But yeah, as you say, it's definitely not the worst option that's being banded around at the moment. But going back to the now, and we'll briefly talk about Ipswich this weekend. As you say, it's one of those games that's going to go two ways, isn't it? Either it's vintage Moyes, and we overpower Ipswich. Our quality shows, similar to how it did in the reverse fixture. Really, one of the better displays under
Yeah.
Dyche this season, I'd say. Um, or it's another really frustrating one where neither team really gives too much, and in the sun, it's just a exhausting slog to a 1-1 or something like that. So it's going to go one of two ways. What are we thinking, and what sort of team would you be putting out?
I think they have to go for it, and I think a worse Everton side beat a better Ipswich side away from home earlier in the season. I would say I want us to, whether I think we will or not, it's a different story, but I want us to win this one comfortably. I want these last two games at Goodison against Ipswich, against Southampton, two sides already relegated. I want clean sheets. I want goals. I want attractive football. In terms of the side, I want Broja back in for Beto. I just want to see him the last few games, really, Broja. I think there is still a question mark over him and whether Moyes is gonna. He wouldn't be playing him at all if there was zero chance he was going to be in an Everton shirt next season. I think some fans are a little bit short-sighted on that one. So I want to see him. I would like to see him get a couple of goals. I'd like to see McNeil back in as well for this one. We've said that the last couple of games, but I think this one where there's a little bit of flair, a little bit of creativity, I think him and Njai behind a Broja would be good. And provided that the loan agreement allows it, I would also like to see Alcaraz play as well because I think he has been a bit of a shining light in brief cameos, particularly in the Chelsea game at the weekend. So, and also we didn't really talk about it with the Chelsea game out, but I did think the O'Brien and Branthwaite pairing worked quite well. And I would like to see that for the remainder of the season too. So other positions flip a coin. But I think that's sort of like where I'm betting on what I would like to see at the weekend.
Yeah, I think we're definitely all decided on that centre back partnership for the remainder of the
Yeah,
season. I'm sorry, it was definitely a bit of a relief not seeing Keane's name in the starting lineup last Saturday. Um, Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with you on most of that. I think I had in my head that the pretty much the team that finished against Chelsea was pretty much what I wanted to see start against Ipswich. I think Alcaraz has to be in there again, pending whatever's going on with the loan, of course, as we still aren't entirely clear on. Um, I agree. I think McNeil's got to start. Obviously, you want to get and die in there. Obviously, there's still. I think there's a little bit of concern over his fitness at the moment. He doesn't seem to have
yeah,
90 minutes in him at the moment. So, obviously, if you maybe just give him an hour and give Harrison the last half hour or whatever. Obviously, not overly thrilled about him being in the team or whatever. I'd start Schmitty, and I think I've had this
okay,
marked for the last few weeks. I think as being a good game for him to maybe get a start in, and I can definitely get the argument. I think it should be one of them two probably if he still wants to have another look at Broja and see if in this sort of game if he can have a bit more of an impact than we've seen from him in the last few weeks, then I'd be okay with that. But I really every time I see Chimete, I do just think there's maybe something there, and I think in a game like this could really be a chance for him to show that he's ready to have more of a part to play next season. Um, and I potentially be dropping Decore back to
mm,
allow for those three behind the striker in Dye, Alcaraz, and McNeil, and
yeah,
and maybe drop James Garner for another one. And then again, we haven't really spoken about either, but obviously it wasn't the best of games for Nathan Patterson in his first start back for a while. But I wouldn't be gutted with him getting another go on Saturday, but simultaneously, I would have started Young last week, and if it was me, I'd
yeah.
probably be starting. I'd probably be starting Young this week as well. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I
we'll see. We'll
I'd
see how
agree
it
with you
goes.
on that one. I would agree with you on that one. And again, to sort of look back to look forwards, as it were, I did think that choice at the weekend last weekend was wrong. We ended up with a very young back four, which is something we have not said as an Everton fan for decades at this point. We always seem to have like one stalwart 30 plus in that side. The back four there with Mikalenko and Patterson, and then the two very young centre backs. It doesn't work for me. I don't know what it is. There's something I just don't like about it. I think you, particularly in defense, have to have that kind of blend of youth and experience. So for me, I think yeah, I'm with you. Ashley Young should play at the
Mm.
weekend.
But with that said, I think it was I did think I saw a little bit of a noticeable difference in Bramthwaite, and
Mm,
I think he had a very very good game and a leader's performance, and I think he's the sort of player that has future England captain written all over him for me. And obviously he'll almost certainly not be at Everton if that does happen, but we all know the quality that Bramthwaite has, and hopefully he's not putting himself too much in the shop window at the moment. But obviously the last few games, I think he's been just as outstanding as ever, really. And it was good to see him, I think, stepping up a little bit on Saturday despite the defeat. But score prediction, as I say, I think I know it's either going to go one of two ways, but let's try and think positively, I guess.
yeah, I'll go 2-0 Everton.
Yeah, I was going to say the same to be fair. So that's a clean sheet would be very welcome, especially
Yes.
if it's a similarly inexperienced defence as you've just touched upon. So but yeah, we'll round off with a lineup quiz as usual, and I'm entering into the bit of the unknown here because I've left you up to this, and I'm not entirely sure what you're going to spring on me here because I'm hoping I'm not
Wow.
getting an Ipswich game from 2000, but I don't even know with you. So go on, let's
We
see what
uh
we've got.
we I did toy with the Ipswich game from 2002, I think it was, but it was a 2-1 defeat, and I didn't want to jinx us. So I kind of did, I think, what you did the other week, Al, with the sort of the game that was played on this day or on the day
Yeah,
that the game is going to take place. So I'm going to take you to the Stadium of Light on the 3rd of May 2009, where Everton beat Sunderland. This is David Moyes' Everton beat Sunderland 2-0 at the Stadium of Light, and it was the game before the FA Cup final. Where we went on to lose to Chelsea. So, yeah, over to you, Al. Stadium of Light, Everton 2, Sunderland nil. David Moyes' Everton.
Yeah, well, that's I'm wearing the kit again. This is
Yeah.
I'm sure I've discussed before. This is my favorite geeky little season when I first got into football and was just obsessed with it. So I'd like to think I've got a good chance here. So if it was Sunderland that it was in May, I know Jagielka was injured by then, so it would have been Baines, Lescott, Yobo, and whoever was at right back. I'll come back to that, and obviously Howard in goal.
Yeah, so
Um,
four for four there straight
yeah.
away.
Uh, Pino and Fellaini both scored, so I'm going to assume they both started, or at very least, obviously, were in the squad.
They did 6 for 6 with no hesitation.
Uh, I'll say Cahill played.
Yeah, 7 for 7.
Leon Osman.
Leon Osman was not in the squad
Oh, no
at all.
way.
So that is a rare life loss now.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That changes things a little bit. So I reckon that means see, we played City the week before when Jagielka got injured. And Gosling
Yeah.
scored in that, so I'm going to say Gosling maybe started on the right if Osman wasn't in.
Yeah, not entirely sure on position in here, but got Goslin played. So
Okay.
that's eight from 9 guesses.
Okay. So it's either in the midfield. Obviously, Arteta's injured by this point, so I'm going to say I reckon maybe Phil Neville played in midfield.
Great one, yeah. Well
Yeah.
done.
And then
Nine,
that'll
nine, nine, nine players. You got two left.
and then see one of them will be on the one. I've got two names, and one of them will be on the bench. I'm pretty sure, even if he's not starting. So I'll go for Tony Hibbert at right back.
Oh, Tony Hibbert is not in the squads.
Oh, no
He's
way!
not even on the bench. I was very surprised at that, but no, not in the squad at all. So two lives
Oh, that
down,
is tough
two
then.
players to get, and one life left.
And he's a defender left then. So you think Neville's in midfield?
Yeah, so I think Neville would have been in midfield. So you're looking for a defender and you're looking for the attacker as well.
Right. Oh, striker's a hard one because I think I know, but so I think right back at that point's got to be Lars Jakobsen.
Well done. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would have been the one I thought might have tripped you up. But yeah, Lars Jakobsen was at right back that game.
Oh, and then this is when we never had any strikers, and everyone was injured every week. So I know Sahar was playing around that time because he scored against West Ham, and obviously he scored in the FA Cup final. So
Yeah.
I'll go for Louis Sahar and hope he wasn't injured.
So he was on the bench. So definitely not
Oh,
not a life lost, a reprieve. You've got one more to get still. Luis Saha was on the
okay,
bench.
so not Yakubu. Could be an Ichibi, but I'll go for Joe. Was it striker?
Well done. Yeah,
Oh my
Joe.
God.
Well done. We're
Oh
literally a good one there, Al, because that was relatively close for you. You usually breeze through them and you made
yeah,
a very strong start. We just quickly cover off the bench
yeah.
aside from Luis Saha. So Carlo Nash on the bench, Secundo Castillo, James Vaughan was on the bench,
Mm.
Jack Rodwell, Kieran Aggard, and I think this was Jed Wallace, the number 38 on the bench. So
Oh
few
yeah,
academy players there.
yeah. Blimey, yeah. Another one of those ridiculous bench for the youth that we used to have all the time. Kieran Agar, bloody hell. But yeah, like I say that season is almost usually a bit of a slam dunk for me. So I'm glad
Yeah.
I've managed to get all the level on that one. And yeah, so yeah. On that note, then, thank you very much for joining me as ever, Harry. Please leave a like if you
Always, mate.
enjoyed. Comment below, giving your thoughts ahead of the Ipswich game and on the Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison questions that keep swirling around. Subscribe to the Toffee Blues channel for more Everton content, and we will see you in the next video. Up the Toffees.